You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network.
You're listening to Straight to the Extra Point, your nugget source for all news, draft coverage, free agency, weekly game analysis, game day betting picks, and fantasy football updates regarding the National Football League. Here's your hosts, Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster.
Welcome back, football fans, to another episode of Straight to the Extra Point, right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network, our 2021 draft recap show for the AFC. This is your May 12th, 2021 edition, your source for North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. You can find us on social media for updates and giveaways by following the podcast on Twitter at ArmchairGMPod, as well as liking us on Facebook and Instagram. You can listen to us on many platforms, including Spreaker.com, the free Spreaker app, Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, CastBox, and Deezer. Wherever you're getting your podcasts at, search us at the Armchair GM Sports Network. And lastly, our beautiful user-friendly website, armchairgmsports.com, for all things regarding the network, including articles, podcast episodes, sponsors, and contributors as well. We have a brand new mobile version of our website, so go and check that out as well. So wherever is most convenient for you to listen to us, we're on all those different platforms for you. Please give us a like and smash that subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to us right now. As always, I'm one of your hosts of Straight to the Extra Point. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13_AGM with a Canadian Z. And I'm always very pleased to be joined on the NFL portion of the network by my good friend and practicing medical professional. He is Miklos McMaster. You can follow him on Twitter at Miklos_McMaster. Miklos, glad to have you back. We had your brother Harry come in as an audible for the draft, the mock draft, but you are back for our biggest show of the year as far as the NFL goes, our AFC and NFC draft recap shows. Fired up to have you back, and it's going to be a long day of recording, but always great stuff to have you on.
Ooh, Coach, am I fired up for this episode and the episode after this? Oh my God, do I love draft recap. Very upset that I wasn't able to participate in the draft show, but, you know, Harry did an admirable job filling in for me, so let's get this show on the road.
Absolutely. So on this episode is going to be all about the AFC today, so we'll go over each division, East, North, South, then West is the rundown of how that's going to work. So without further ado here, let's jump right into it, Miklos. And again, I guess we were talking about off air, just your thoughts on how it went this year and kind of the draft process and the draft in Cleveland. But even before that, it was difficult for teams this year, obviously, with the college season, a lot of players opting out. So we didn't get to see maybe as great of game film as we would in previous years as far as up-to-date game film. And obviously the process of not being able to meet in person, doing a lot of Zoom stuff, and just the draft process this year was a lot different and more difficult for teams because of the pandemic.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just not having a combine as well, say what you will about the combine in terms of evaluating players, but there's always guys who jump up people's boards with how they perform at the combine. And I know people take a lot out of pro days, but it's very different whenever you're competing with all these other guys not at your school in a setting that you're familiar with. You have to go down to Indianapolis and everything. So there is that. And then the other thing, especially you mentioned the COVID shortened season for college players and guys opting out. You know, teams always have to be wary whether a guy's performance in 2019 was just a flash in a pan or was something consistent, and then they opt out the next year, and you kind of have to rely on tape from over a year ago, and you just got to hope that that guy has been showing the dedication to keep training over this past year, even though they weren't playing, and will be able to carry whatever they produced in the final full season of college football before COVID to the NFL.
Well said. So again, it was a little bit different this year, but with that said, Miklos, let's get into the AFC portion of this. And before we get into it, I mean, the AFC, I feel like the power has kind of shifted from the NFC quarterbacks to the AFC quarterbacks in the last couple of years with the great young quarterbacks that have come into the AFC. And to me, it seems like right now the AFC is the conference to beat right now with all these young quarterbacks. So it seems like a lot of those teams that were looking for quarterbacks in the AFC, kind of knew that it's going to be tough sledding. You're going to have to get through the Mahomes of the world, the Josh Allens, the Lamar Jacksons, all the other quarterbacks in the AFC. And we always talk about the NFC being having the better quarterbacks, but right now it seems like the AFC is kind of leading that, and every team right now is looking for top quarterbacks to kind of compete with those other top teams every year.
Yeah, for sure. With the NFL turning towards passing more, and everyone knows the quarterback is the most important position in football, but we've definitely are in a bit of a golden age of quarterbacks, I think, compared to maybe a couple of years ago. We still have a lot of the older guys. I know we had Phillip Rivers and Drew Brees retire, which is kind of that generation starting to fade away. But I mean, we still have Big Ben out there, and I mean, Tom Brady's never going to retire. So we still have some of those old veterans, and then just a ton of young, fresh talent, and even more coming in this draft.
Absolutely. So we'll get into that. So without further ado, let's get into our first division of the day, and that is going to be obviously the AFC East, with obviously the Buffalo Bills are the popular team around here. Circle the wagons for the Buffalo Bills. So we got some fan input from the Bills, and again, this is an episode where we do have a lot of fan input and people that have sent in their thoughts on their favorite teams about their draft. So we'll start off here with the Buffalo Bills, and we'll start off with Alex James, who writes for our Buffalo Bills column on our website. So make sure you're going and checking out his Buffalo Bills articles. He has a draft recap on there as well. He said, if I had to give my subjective opinion on the Bills draft selections, I would give a B to B+. I believe in the 2021 season, these rookies will have a very limited role for the team. However, Bean and company are looking to create a foundation for the future. 2 monster O-lineman selections are critical for the future protection of Josh Allen if they pan out to be NFL starters. Adding D-line and secondary depth is critical for the aging defense in those areas and will teach the rookies over the next few couple years. These picks were by no means the flashiest choices, but then again, the majority of picks outside the top 10 aren't. These picks are to encompass what Bean, McDermott, and the Pagulas have set out to do: win a Super Bowl and create a winning culture in the great city of Buffalo. Let's use that term lightly as we say what's going on with the hockey team. So thank you, Alex James, for that one. Austin Broad, who contributes for our Buffalo Sabres portion of the network, he says, the Bills didn't have any glaring needs in the draft, maybe at running back, but nothing was immediately pressing. With 2 first-round picks, they drafted defensive linemen. With their first 2 picks, they drafted defensive linemen with the versatile play inside and on the edge. Will have a year to sit and learn while getting limited snaps. With their other picks, I like the strategy of taking uber-athletic offensive linemen who can develop into potential starters, and they took a swing on a speedy wide receiver that can likely make a day-one impact as a returner. The safety pick also fills a need because they need to have depth behind Poyer and Hyde. So thank you very much, Austin, for that. And lastly, Derek Bastian says, I was happy with the Russo pick. A lot of people had him going in the top 15 of the mock draft, so him falling to the Bills at 30 was very surprising. The Bills needed to buff up their pass rush, and they did so with their first 2 picks. Boggy Basham was a great addition as well. I know the guy won't probably play this year, but to have them develop under Jerry Hughes is huge for the defense. So thank you, Derek, Alex, and Austin, for your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills. Miklos, let's get your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills. Their biggest needs going into the draft were D-end, running back, offensive tackle, corner, and defensive tackle. So what do you think about the Buffalo Bills draft in 2021?
Yeah, I think it was solid. I think they were lucky that Rousseau fell to them. He is a freak athletically, but he did opt out of the 2020 season, and he's been a little bit inconsistent in his time at the U. But they have one of the best defenses in football, so this is a perfect guy to take to their team. They did need some help with their pass rush. The Bills weren't the best at rushing the passer last year, and adding 2 defensive ends or edge guys. I mean, really, these guys don't have positions anymore in the NFL. But these 2 edge guys with their first 2 picks, I think that was really, really smart. all O-linemen, never a bad thing to draft to keep adding more depth and more protection for your all-star quarterback. I was surprised that even in the later rounds, they didn't address the running back position, because that was something they really struggled with late in the year. I mean, Josh Allen was really the only threat to run the ball, and you don't want him running that often, especially with risk of injury and things like that. And both Zach Moss and Devin Singletary were extremely average, if not even subpar. So I guess they're really hoping that these two guys will step up this year. So that was a bit surprising for me that they didn't address that, the running back position a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought they were going to go after one of those top running backs like a Najee Harris or Travis Etienne maybe later in the first round, but I think the Bills kind of needed a draft that wasn't going to be the sexiest of drafts. They took 2 defensive ends, 2 offensive tackles, a later round wide receiver. So, I mean, again, they had to fill some holes on obviously the O-line and defensive line, but taking a corner, I think, was another big thing for them. I think taking a 6th-round corner, maybe they could have drafted a corner earlier on, but I guess in the spots that they were in, they didn't like the corners that were available, so they didn't feel like jumping up to get one either. So, I mean, I'm not going to question what the Bills and Brandon Beane have been doing, because they've obviously been doing a great job over the last couple of years, but I think they definitely filled a couple of needs. But I like you mentioned, I think a running back or an earlier cornerback probably would have been sufficient for the Bills. So for me, I think I'm going to give them probably around the same grade that the others were giving them. I'm going to give them about a B to B plus kind of area, because they filled a couple of needs, but I really think if they would have been able to get a top end running back and maybe a 2nd-round cornerback, that would have really been beneficial for this team. But they get a couple of DNs and a couple offensive linemen, so B to B plus for me for the Bills.
Yeah, I give them a solid B, and I guess I'll take this opportunity, as we've mentioned with all the issues with the 2020 college season and everything, at least for me, I was fairly conservative with my evaluations for teams in the draft, because we don't know for sure how some of these guys are going to turn out, and there hasn't been the most information out there about how they did, given especially if they opted out, like someone like Rousseau. But solid draft by the Bills, definitely.
Yeah, I think Greg Rousseau is definitely going to be a solid guy to add to the locker room. He seems like one of those great character players and just wants to help out the team in any way he can. So I think the Bills have a gem in that guy with the 30th pick. So solid selection for the Buffalo Bills and in their draft. So we'll move on to the Miami Dolphins and Tua time. They're looking to build back up. Brian Flores has done a great job in the first 2 years as Miami Dolphins head coach. Probably overachieved in both years that he was there. So, Miklos, their biggest needs going into the draft for Miami, just pulling it up here, were wide receiver, running back, offensive guard, guard and tackle, and outside linebacker. So what do you think about the Miami Dolphins? They continue their trend with Alabama Tua. They get Jalen Waddle. They're his wide receiver from Alabama. So what do you think about Brian Flores and the Dolphins draft?
Yeah, I think the Bengals screwed Miami, because I think they were really hoping that either Kyle Pitts or Jamar Chase would fall to them, and that's what everyone seemed to think. And the Bengals, I think, surprised everybody with taking Jamar Chase at the 5th spot. Not to say that Jalen Waddle is like any really bad consolation prize. I'm sure they're more than happy with him, especially because he's got a relationship with Tua, which that goes a long way, regardless of comparing talent of wide receivers. A relationship with a quarterback will go further than any specific talent will. So I think Tua and Waddle are both extremely happy. I'm sure the Dolphins are very happy with their pick. I think their other picks as well. I think Jalen Phillips, they get the other talented defensive end from the U to add to their pass rush, to add some more depth on their defense. And then Javon Holland, one of the few guys that I was able to watch consistently, as I'm an Oregon fan and watch a lot of their games. Awesome back-end safety, and to add more talent to their secondary with Xavier Howard and Byron Jones and give them someone over top is an awesome pick. And even Eichenberger from Notre Dame, solid tackle, adding more depth to their offensive line to protect Tua. I think it was overall a very good draft. And I mean, given the coaching that we've been seeing out of Miami over this last year, I'm excited to see how these new guys get added into the new system.
And as Miami continues to build back up, they've had the luxury of having a couple of first-round picks in the last couple of years. They had 2 in last year's draft. They had 2 in this year's draft. So they were a fun team to use in Madden to kind of build back up as one of those franchises. It was a lot of fun to do. I did one with Miami, and they basically had a lot of options to build this team back up, and I think they did a solid job of that. You get Jalen Waddle, you get Jalen Phillips in the first round. Javon Holland, the Canadian, the first safety taken off the board in round 2, and like you mentioned, Eichenberg is a solid offensive lineman that they took as well in the second. So they had 2 firsts, 2 seconds, a third, and then 2 sevenths. So they were able to get a lot of top-end talent onto this continuing to build Miami franchise here, and they're going to need to keep up with the Bills, it seems like, these next couple of years, and even the Patriots are no slouch, and the Jets are trying to build their way back up. So this is going to be a tough division going forward here, Miklos, and I think Miami's going to be one of those teams that's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and they're not to be taken lightly in this division. And again, I think I'm going to give them a B+ in this draft because I think they addressed most of their key needs, and again, they had 2 firsts, 2 seconds, so it's hard to mess that up when you have so many top-end draft picks. So I'm going to give the Dolphins a B+ here.
Yeah, I'm going to give them a B. I think they filled a lot of needs. They got a lot of talented players there. Also, they're another team that I'm surprised didn't address the running back position at all. I mean, they still have Myles Gaskin and Malcolm Brown as their top 2 running backs, which is not really anything impressive. I know Gaskin did impress quite a bit last year when given opportunities, but he's not someone who's going to be your bell cow. So, but I do like a lot of their picks. They filled a lot of needs and definitely a young, exciting team. And it's good to see the Bills-Dolphins rivalry, which has been a very historic rivalry in the NFL, coming back and going to be strong moving forward.
It's alive and well. So Miami, I give them a B+. Miklos gives them a solid B as they continue to build back up with Brian Flores. It's a fun team to watch build back up the conference and the NFL rankings. So next we got everybody's favorite, the New England Patriots, as they seems like Bill Belichick had 1 year of losing and can't handle that anymore. He went out and signed a bunch of guys in free agency, spent more money in free agency than he's done in the last probably decade or so. And then in the draft, they obviously go out and get, looks like to be their franchise quarterback in Mac Jones from Alabama. You know, Nick Saban and Bill Belichick, the friendship that they have, you know, Nick Saban was obviously giving him some knowledge about some of the guys in his great program down there in Alabama and the defending national champions. So they take Mac Jones and they take another Alabama player right after that, Christian Barmore, who I had actually going in the end of the first round. There weren't a lot of great defensive tackles this year, inside defensive linemen, but he seemed like to be the best one off the board there in the second round. So they get 2 great Alabama players back-to-back there. Their biggest needs were quarterback, corner, wide receiver, running back, inside linebacker. What do you think of Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots this year, Miklos, as they hopefully, for their sake, build back up after 1 year of not making the playoffs?
Well, I think they're finally getting back to normal of what Bill Belichick probably wants to run as his franchise, because he did mention and we could see that they did sell out a couple of years in terms of their future to make sure they could win with Tom Brady while they still had Tom Brady, and it kind of cost them the last couple of years. But then we saw in free agency massive spending spree to get players, and then the draft turned out really well, which, I mean, ironically enough, historically hasn't exactly been the Patriots' strong suit. They haven't really landed, especially in the front half of the draft, which is crazy that they haven't really snagged a lot of crazy talented players in the draft. They usually are developing other people's cast-offs. But this draft, I think, was awesome for them. And having Mac Jones fall to them, I mean, you would have thought a team would have just traded up and tried to draft him just to avoid this situation where a guy so perfectly made for Bill Belichick goes to Bill Belichick, and they didn't even need to trade up for him or anything, which is crazy. And then they get a guy like Christian Barmore, and I mean, we've seen year in and year out what Alabama D linemen do in the NFL and how well they translate to the pro game. I think also picking up Perkins and Stevenson, adding another edge player and adding depth to their running back room, I think were both great pickups in the third and fourth round. Overall, I thought it was a really, really solid draft by the Patriots.
Trey Nixon in the seventh round, is that guy going to be the next Randy Moss, just the way that the Patriots seem to luck out with their late round picks?
I mean, he came from UCF, although I will say his primary position whenever he got drafted was wide receiver, which is something the Patriots historically have struggled with. If he had been a quarterback or a running back for UCF, and then they said they were converting him to a wide receiver, then yeah, I would have been very scared.
Yeah, but I mean, the Patriots obviously doing a great job getting Mac Jones. He was projected maybe to even go up to number 3, where the San Francisco 49ers eventually took Trey Lance, but it seemed like there really wasn't a team in between there, so it seemed like he was going to go to number 3 to San Francisco, or he was going to drop all the way to 15 to New England, and that was a dream scenario for the Patriots. Nobody went up to get him. People were going up to get wide receivers, so the quarterback that they wanted all along fell to them at number 15, so I think that right there is a win for the New England Patriots and their future at quarterback. We know they re-signed Cam Newton, but obviously that's just kind of a stopgap, or who knows what he's going to be for this team if Mac Jones ends up playing in his first year. But with that said, I think New England did a good job. They obviously had some guys opt out last year, and last year was what it was for the Patriots. A very unlikely year for them. But I think they did a solid job, unfortunately, in free agency and in the draft here to build themselves back up into maybe a playoff contending team. So what is your draft grade for the Patriots?
I give them an A-. Solid draft by the Patriots. They get their potential franchise quarterback of the future land right in their lap, getting a solid defensive line combo in Barmore and Perkins in second and third, and then picking up some running back depth in the fourth. Overall, very solid draft.
I'm going to give the Patriots a B+. So a lot of high grades here for the AFC East so far. We've all in the B's, and you've given New England an A-. I'm sure that hurts your soul to give Bill Belichick and the Patriots an A- here, but I mean, how can you not with what they were able to bring into the organization? They did a good job, and we'll see kind of what that division shakes out like this year. But so I gave them New England a B+. Miklos gave them an A-. Last but not least, we have the New York Football Jets, and oh man, did they need a good draft. Obviously, with the season that they had last year with Adam Gase and trading away Sam Darnold, it looks like it's going to be a new era of Jets football down there for Robert Saleh, who's the new head coach of the Jets. So with that said, got some Jets input here. Firstly, from Rob Ferrioli, now a USC Trojan down there in California. He's enjoying his time there. So he says, I'm in on Zach Wilson, but I don't quite see what separates him from Darnold or Justin Fields out of college. The Jets did a great job, however, of drafting Vera Tucker, who projects as a left guard to shore up the O-line and build a wall on the left side of Becton, with the left side of Becton as well. They also got a couple skill position players in Elijah Moore and Michael Carteso. Joe Douglas in 3 rounds did more for Zach Wilson than Mike McCagnon did for Sam Darnold in 3 seasons. It seems like day 3 was filled with dart throws for super athletic defensive backs and a couple hybrid safeties, linebackers, which I'm all for. Overall, seems like a solid draft, but it really hinges on the QB for Joe Douglas. If he got that right, then the rest should fall into place. Based off what I know, a B+. So thank you very much, Rob, for that response. And lastly, for the New York Jets, my buddy Mike Daniel, who always, for the 3 years that we've been doing this show, always gives us a great write-up about his New York Jets. And he's always very enthusiastic about sending me his input for these draft shows. So thank you, Michael. He says, Joe Douglas and the New York Jets did a great job of finally drafting like it's the 21st century. With their first 2 picks, the Jets took offense, and more offense. For a team that usually drafts defense heavy, this was a pleasant surprise for fans around the country. We did not know what Zach Wilson is or what he will be. However, Joe Douglas showed that if he is putting his name to this pick, he will do everything possible to make sure Wilson has every opportunity to succeed at the NFL. If Douglas, using his plethora of draft picks to move up to 14 to draft the best guard in the draft, and Elijah Vera Tucker was an aggressive and smart move. The Jets have had the worst guard play in the last 3 years. Hopefully the left side with Becton and Vera Tucker will be dominant opposing teams for the foreseeable future. Elijah Moore gives the Jets much needed speed and someone to blow the top off the defense. Moore will give a safety blanket and gives him someone to throw to his rookie year. Michael Carter is an ideal scheme fit in a wide receiver or wide zone rushing attack. Carter is fast, shifty, and can score at any time he touches the ball. With their final 5 picks, the Jets went defense and bet on athleticism and intangibles more than college production. I hope that Saleh can coach these players up and use them in his cover 3 zone defense. Overall, this is the draft that will make or break Joe Douglas as the general manager of the Jets. They seem to be headed in the right direction and finally headed to where football has blown them by the last few decades. Lastly, a quote from Saleh to Wilson, which I find to be very encouraging and seems like they learned from their mistakes with Darnold. Just remember, we're going to lift you, not the other way around. As tortured Jets fans, we just have to hope the people in charge are finally going to get this right. So thank you, Mike Daniel, as always, for your enthusiasm about sending me your New York Jets thoughts. So got a lot there to dissect there, Miklos, but what do you think about the New York Jets draft this year? Quarterback, running back, corner, offensive guard, DN. They basically needed, to quote you last year, everything under the sun. So how do you think that they did?
I think they're off to a terrific start. I think they really hit it with Becton last year. He was one of the best rookie offensive linemen in the league and one of the few bright spots for what was an absolute dumpster fire of a season for the Jets last year. And then they add Elijah Vera-Tucker. They trade up to get him to just solidify that offensive line, which is what you want to do if you have now invested in the future with Zach Wilson, and he is the guy there. You definitely, unlike what they did with Sam Darnold, want to help him out. They bring in Elijah Moore, who, based on their wide receiving room, is probably going to compete for one of the top spots right off the bat in camp. So they are still pretty thin there, but then adding Michael Carter in, who's part of that unbelievable running back tandem in North Carolina, again, just gives Zach Wilson more help. If they can run the ball effectively with LaMichael Pirine and Michael Carter and Tevin Coleman there, that'll definitely help Zach Wilson out while he's learned the ropes and figuring out this NFL game. Overall, just really solid draft. And of course, the back end, you're going to fill up with defensive guys that you are hoping that Saleh can make the most out of, especially with developing these 6th and 7th round picks.
10 draft picks this year, Miklos, for the New York Jets. It was definitely a big draft for them, but I'm like you. I think they addressed a lot of needs here, and with 10 picks, they had a luxury to bring in a lot of guys to fill in a lot of spots that they needed, because this Jets team definitely needed a lot. They did some nice moves in free agency as well, so this is going to be a tough division. There really isn't going to be any slouches, I think, in the NFC East, at least for a couple of years here, with the way that Miami's playing, the Bills, obviously, and New England wanted to build back up, and even the Jets, they want to go in the right direction here. So it seems like it's going to be a very tough division, and I hope for Jets fans who have kind of been one of the laughing stocks of the NFL, hopefully this new regime and this new era of Jets football is going to be something that they can be proud of, and better for the league, I think, when the Jets are doing well also, because it's such a big market, and obviously when those big teams are playing well, it just generates more revenue for the NFL.
For sure. It's always better whenever there's teams that are improving. I think turnarounds for teams is just good for the league. It's never good whenever you have teams that are just perpetually terrible. It brings everything down, and then it just makes for an embarrassment on the league to have an organization like that. Yeah,
absolutely. So I'm going to give the Jets an A- for their draft. I think they addressed a lot of needs, and it was a big draft for them with 10 picks. They needed to hit on a couple of these. They had 2 firsts. They had a second, and then they had a bunch of later round picks. So I think the Jets and Robert Saleh did a good job, and Joe Douglas, for the first year of this kind of new era of Jets football. So I'm going to give them an A- for their draft.
I'm also giving them an A-. Based on all the needs they filled, looks like they hit on their top 4 picks for sure, and maybe Robert Saleh can turn these later guys into studs as well. So based on their needs and where they were at last year, it's definitely looking bright in New York.
Yeah, the offense looks a lot better from their first 4 picks: a quarterback, a guard, a wide receiver, and a running back. So the offense is building back up for the New York Jets. So that's it for the AFC East. To recap, I gave the Bills a B to B+. Miklos gave them a B. Miami, B+, and a B. New England, B+, and A-. And the New York Jets, both consensus with an A- grade. So a lot of solid grades here for the AFC East, and this division I don't think is going to be a slouch moving forward, and I think we agree that they've done a good job so far in the 2021 offseason. So with that said, guys, we're going to take our first commercial break, and we're going to come back and get our thoughts on the AFC North next. So stay right here. We'll be right back on Straight to the Extra Point and right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, serving traditional-style Italian pizzas made with the freshest, top-quality ingredients. Loaded subs and their famous chicken wings. Winners of the Reader's Choice Diamond Award, 4 years running from Niagara this week for Best Pizza and Wings in Niagara Falls. Home of the best tray and wing combo in town for the price and quality. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 9 p.m., located on the corner of Drummond Road and Dunn Street. Available for call-ahead pickup or delivery at 905-374-4400. Make sure to like them on Facebook and view their website for their menu at carmine'spizzeria.ca. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano. Way too good. As we all adjust to this new world that we're living in today, masks are now mandatory, and Niagara's own Custom PPE is Canada's leading face mask provider. Visit them online at customppe.ca and choose between several mask options with different colors and sizes. Add your organization, company, or team logo so you make your face masks unique. Available to purchase online 24/7 at customppe.ca and shipped within 1 week. They have the best prices and quickest turnaround in Canada, and no order is too big or too small. Also offering custom floor stickers as well as face and counter shields for your business or workplace. Visit customppe.ca and use the code ARMCHAIR at checkout for 20% off your custom or blank face mask today. Custom PPE, Canada's leading face mask provider. Attention job seekers, if you are currently looking for work in the Niagara region, you owe it to yourself to check out the services provided by the Niagara Employment Help Center, located at 6100 Thoroldstone Road, Niagara Falls, directly across from the Camisos Plaza. Their free services include resume and cover letter writing, community resource and referral information, local labor market information, job search strategies, assistance with clarifying employment training and career goals, employment counseling and job search support, second career information and registration assistance, and all their services are currently provided by appointment only. So give them a call at 905-358-0021 or visit their website at ehc.on.ca, the Niagara Employment Help Center. This Employment Ontario program is funded by the Government of Ontario.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Yes, we are back, ladies and gentlemen, for segment 2 of our AFC Draft Recap Show. Brandon Caputo Miklos McMaster back with you here. And this second segment on today's show is brought to you by J&L Flooring, a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. Simplified processes and making homes beautiful are their specialties. Visit them at jnlflooring.com to start on the floor of your dreams today. So, Miklos, let's continue on here. We've got the AFC North division here. And we'll start off with the Baltimore Ravens, a team with Lamar Jackson and company, John Harbaugh. We know that they're a good organization. They always seem to draft well, but the Ravens this year, you know, they had 2 first-round picks. They obviously made that trade with Kansas City, which was wildly criticized for the fact that they gave up a starting left tackle to their biggest opponent and biggest threat in the AFC. For a first-round pick. They probably could have got a lot more for doing so, and the Chiefs' biggest need that they needed was a left tackle. So we can say what we want about that. They end up getting 2 first-round picks. Because of that trade, they had 2/3, a fourth, and 3/5. So the biggest needs for the Ravens were offensive tackle, wide receiver, outside linebacker, center, and offensive guard. Miklos, what did you think of the Ravens in this draft?
I think the Ravens did as the Ravens do. It was another solid draft. They have been very solid in the draft. I think getting Jason Owa in the first round was huge for them, considering Matt Judon left in free agency to the Patriots, no less. So if he can step in and start providing some pass rush right off the bat, that will be great news for them. And I think with their very first pick, they did exactly what they needed to do in this draft, and that was to get a wide receiver for Lamar Jackson so he can have another threat to throw to, and then they need to develop some kind of passing game. We know their premier premier team at running the ball, but I mean, passing, their wide receiving room has been really thin, and really they make a lot of use out of their tight ends. But besides Marquise Brown, and even he is hit and miss, I think adding Rashad Bateman was a great pick, and even picking up Sammy Watkins in free agency is going to give Lamar Jackson a lot of help. I think a really solid draft here by the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, Rashad Bateman, he was kind of the guy that everybody said he doesn't do anything really really great, but he's good at everything. Like, he's just your prototypical solid wide receiver, does everything well. He's one of those safety net guys that you can go to. He does everything well. So I think the Ravens kind of needed a guy like that. They like you mentioned, they have their burner in Marquise Hollywood Brown, but he's not going to be that guy in the red zone. They have Mark Andrews, obviously, as a tight end who is more like a receiver at this point, but they kind of needed that guy opposite to Hollywood Brown that can just, be that possession receiver and make those big catches. We saw that they tried to make that at a Willie Snead last year, and that just did not work very well. So I think that was a great pick. I think Terrence Marshall would have been a nice pick. Harry and myself both had the Ravens taking Terrence Marshall with their 27th overall pick at a wide receiver, but they still took a receiver. Rashad Bateman's still a solid player, and like you mentioned, they need to replace Matthew Judon, who left for a big deal with the Patriots, so I think was a solid add as well, and I think Ben Cleveland's a solid guard as well, so they did an okay job at filling that. They still don't have their starting left tackle, but with that said, I think the Ravens, like you mentioned, do what the Ravens do. They always seem to have a solid draft. They always seem to have a decent amount of picks. I know they didn't have a second, but they had an extra third this year, the extra first with the trade with the Chiefs. So I think the Ravens did another solid job here. I'm going to give them a B+ on what they were able to do. They filled a couple of needs later on as well with a couple of their key needs. So I think the Ravens and their brass, as always, we seem to say the Ravens do a good job in the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. I also think another, just talking from a draft standpoint, great pick by them getting Shaun Wade, the corner out of Ohio State, in the 5th round. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was pushed to the outside this past year, this COVID-shortened season, and didn't really turn out well for him. But the year prior in 2019 was dominant at the nickel spot, and if he can slot in there, nickelback has become a starting true need for teams in the NFL with the way the passing attacks have come. So if he can step up and fill that role and become a great slot corner like he was for the Buckeyes in 2019, that could be a steal in the 5th round for them. I'm also going to give them a B+.
Okay, so we're both on consensus that the Ravens get a B+ for their draft. Another solid, as we keep saying, the Ravens, they always seem to have a solid draft. So 11-5 record, second in AFC North last year. I think they're continuing to try to build into something and to compete in this very tough AFC. And they're going to have to, with some of the teams in their division getting better. So with the Ravens, they needed help for Lamar Jackson. I think they got it with a guard and a wide receiver, although I'm still wondering what they're going to do at left tackle. But, there's still time in the offseason to figure that out. But we'll have to see how that works out for Baltimore. Next, we'll move on to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Got some, obviously, of course, we got to have some Steelers input. There aren't enough Steelers fans around to get input from. I'm sure we were scraping for Steeler thoughts because, there's... Anyways, I'm going to stop talking about the Steelers and just get into the input from the Steelers fans as, they always want to talk is what I'm saying. The Steelers fans, they're not shy to give their opinion on their franchise. So here we go with Adam Phelps, and again, why he sent me this in PDF format, I have no idea, but thank you, Adam. He says, first round, great selection. Alabama just produces good running backs, so I don't see a downside to this selection. Pittsburgh was in rough shape with the run game. James Conner was a Band-Aid. Respect the guy for beating cancer and coming back. He just wasn't the fit for the Steelers. In the second, another good pick in my opinion. Fearmorth is a beast, 6'5", 250. Could be a great option for run block. Steelers do have Ebron still for skilled route combos out of the tight end slot, so a big beast is what we needed with Vance McDonald retiring. Round 3 would like to have seen some defense be selected at this point in the draft. However, Pittsburgh is clearly trying to improve the run game from every angle, and a 6'2", 300-pound guard is definitely a step in the right direction. 4th round, first pick, 6'6", 311 pounds. If this guy keeps his strength up can be a great asset since one tackle, Zach Banner, coming off ACL tear. Going to need depth. Round 4, second pick. Finally some defense. Not the pick I was looking for, though. He will be nice if he can develop with the team as Vince Williams is most likely on in his last season. However, need more at the corner position. Need some development there badly. 5th round, Loudermilk, best name in the draft, by the way, is a beast. 6'8", 290. Holy big dude. This guy had got potential, but a slower pass rusher, and I feel not as needed on the defensive end. However, if the Steelers can develop this guy properly, he will be a force. He's 6'8", dude should be playing basketball. Thank you very much, Adam, for that. And last but not least, with the Pittsburgh Steelers, we have Nick Cicino. He says, first off, I want to start off by saying the Steelers got one of the biggest athletes in the draft and the clear number 1 running back. I thought they might have gone with a center with their first-round pick, but our running back depth was pretty rotten. Najee Harris is going to be an instant improvement for our O and a fantasy stud. He spelt fantasy wrong. Jeez, Nick, come on, man. They shocked me with their second pick of Pat Freiermuth, but his tape looks good. Again, I thought they'd go with an offensive lineman here. I really like Kendrick Green. He reminds me of Mike Pouncey, but that with the mean streak in him. Overall, I'm pretty happy. A good variety of positions and gaps, but they needed to be filled. Have a question, though. Is Jamar Chase going to block TJ Watt or what? Friggin' bungles. I guess that is a rib at his Cincinnati Bengals rivalry there. But with that said, Miklos, and I also almost forgot that Villanueva, the former tackle from the Steelers, signed with the Ravens, so that is going to be, I guess, their left tackle for Lamar Jackson over there. So another guy going from one side of the rivalry to another in Villanueva, the offensive lineman from Pittsburgh to Baltimore. So they kind of had to fill that need as well, Miklos. So how do you think the Pittsburgh Steelers were able to fare in the draft here? Their biggest needs were running back, offensive tackle, as I just mentioned, guard, center, and I guess quarterback, but they did not decide to go there.
Yeah, I was going to say, they still have Ronnie Stanley, too, the Ravens. It was just the right tackle spot that they were trying to fill in. But yeah, at Villanueva, it's crazy going to their biggest rival. That's going to be something to watch. Him and TJ Watt going up against each other in their coming games. But anyways, on to the Steelers. They took Najee Harris, as I expected they would, because that was one of their biggest weaknesses down the stretch. Even though they started off the season 11-0, they lost the ability to run the ball with injuries to all of their running backs. It seemed to be out at one point or another. And so that was definitely a need, especially with Ben Roethlisberger perpetually being on the will he or won't he retire list. They also added a tight end, which I really like. They needed more help there. Eric Ebron, very athletic, just has never really panned out to what people expect him to be with his athleticism. And also, as mentioned by our wonderful commenters, that he can bring a lot of help blocking, which Ebron doesn't really do. So that's going to be good for them because they already have a stacked set of receivers for Roethlisberger to throw to. Picking up some linemen, which they definitely needed. That might be one concern for them this year. These rookies have some pretty big shoes to fill, I think. With Villanueva, he's been consistent there for at least a decade or close to it, and so that's might be a big hole for them in defending Big Ben, and we know he's taken more than his fair share of hits over his career. I do agree that Isaiah Loudermilk is probably one of the best names in this draft, just fantastic all around. But they did add some depth on defense. It always seems like they neglect their secondary, Pittsburgh, but I mean, even whenever they do draft corners very high, we remember Artie Burns and Sean Davis. They both didn't turn out quite so well. So might be why they're a bit hesitant there, but they filled in some depth. So overall, I think pretty solid draft.
What would you give the Pittsburgh Steelers draft?
I'm going to give them a solid B. I mean, they filled in their needs. They obviously think Ben Roethlisberger still has at least this year in the tank, if not next year. I know they have some younger quarterbacks on the roster. They even added Dwayne Haskins, but I mean, it really doesn't look like they have anybody there planning for the future. So that might be one thing that they might have to consider in free agency or next offseason. Yeah,
absolutely. So, I mean, I like the Najee Harris pick. I think they definitely needed an upgrade at running back, but I think they just really needed to protect Big Ben. Obviously, the tight end that they got is going to be a little bit more of a kind of a blocking tight end than maybe as a receiver, like Nick and yourself had mentioned there. Ebron wasn't the greatest blocking tight end, so they kind of get that with Freemuth, and then they draft a center in Kendra Green. So I think they do an okay job there. Would I have liked them to take an offensive lineman in the first round? Yes, but would Najee Harris have probably been there had they done that? Probably not. I think he probably would have gone later in the first round. So they do get a guy like Najee Harris, which the running game, the Steelers they're notorious for building off of their run game, and they need that solid run game, which they didn't get with James Conner just by him being in and out of the lineup last year, and they kind of needed that guy, that star guy in Najee Harris. So I think they did a good job. I'm going to give them in between a B- and a B, because I really think that they could have done a better job at protecting Ben, even though they got a couple of guys in the second and third round that could be pretty good at that, and even in the fourth round as well with Dan Moore Jr., the offensive tackle from Texas A&M. So I just think the Steelers could have had a little bit better of a draft, but I'm not going to give them too much gripe on that, because they did go out and get probably the best running back available in the draft. So for me, I'm going to give the Steelers a B- to a B. You're going to give them a B, and that's going to be it for the Steelers as they continue to battle with the Baltimore Ravens. And like you mentioned, Villanueva going over to the Ravens, it's going to be fun to see TJ Watt and him go at it. So with that said, let's go over to the Cincinnati Bengals. And obviously we got input with the Bengals from our good friend and contributor on our Ballin' in the Six podcast covering basketball. He is Chico Nation from thescore.com. He says Cincinnati's O-line was undoubtedly their biggest area of concern, but the team also lacked a deep threat that could create separation vertically. And a deep O-line class allowed the Bengals to address both those holes while maximizing the value of their first two draft picks. The team also managed to gain 2 extra fourth-round picks in a trade with the New England Patriots, which allowed them to further replenish the trenches. Drafting a kicker early will always be a risk, but Evan McPherson has a range that the club has lacked at the position for years and is a clear upgrade over Austin Seibert. But I have a question. Does having Najee Harris matter when an O-line can't even block or create holes? Sounds like Big Ben is going to be hiding behind a curtain. Who dey? So that is a rib between the Steelers and the Bengals that has been going on between Nick Cicino and Chico Nation for years, not even just on this show. But good stuff there from the Cincinnati Bengals. Thank you, Chico. And obviously the Bengals are trying to build their way back up. We had them, at least I did, with Penei Sewell as the guy that they were going to take from the beginning of the year. They were going to try and protect Joe Burrow, obviously their franchise quarterback. Went out with a season-ending injury. They don't want that to happen again. I had Sewell pegged for the Bengals from the beginning, but they did not go there. They decided to go with Jamar Chase, the stud wide receiver from LSU, kind of to pair with Joe Burrow, the LSU connection there. We know what Jamar Chase is, but did the Bengals do enough in your mind, Miklos, to think that they're going to be able to compete in this division with a couple of those really tough teams?
Yeah, so, I mean, I see where the Bengals are coming from. I think Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow combined for 23 touchdowns in their championship-winning season, and Jamar Chase is absolutely dominant. Pairing him with T. Higgins, who I think a lot of people forget had a pretty solid rookie season last year out of Clemson, and obviously they were betting that this offensive line class in the draft, was very deep. They get Jackson Carman out of Clemson. It's a blue blood program. You can see teams really going towards these blue blood programs for offensive linemen. Your Alabamas, Clemson, Ohio State, these teams. So they obviously liked the chance of getting someone like Carman in the second round, which is who they got. They're hoping Jonah Williams can take a step for them, their left tackle, who they drafted with their first-round pick in 2019. And they're hoping overall, as a group, that this offensive line can take a step next year in defending Joe Burrow. They did sign Riley Reif, who, I mean, is okay and also very old, but they're hoping he can stabilize that right tackle position. The bottom line is they need to protect Joe Burrow, and they're hoping that giving him lots of talent back there with Joe Mixon and hoping this O-line group can take a step, that they've done that. The rest of the draft, they added lots of depth players on the offensive and defensive side of the ball on the line specifically, which is where you win the game. Everyone knows you win the game in the trenches. Would I have liked them to take Penei Sewell, who allowed only 1 sack over his entire career at Oregon and was absolutely dynamite across the board against everyone he faced? I mean, absolutely. And I think that would have been the safer pick, but obviously they're happy with their decision.
Yep. So what is your draft grade for the Cincinnati Bengals?
Overall, if it works out for them and Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow again combined for 20 touchdowns between the two of them, it's a hit. But I'm giving them a B- just because I think despite how talented Jamar Chase is and the connection they have, having a perennial Pro Bowl left tackle just sitting there for you to take, you don't get that opportunity very many times in the draft. And I think it was a miss to not take Sewell there.
I couldn't agree more. I'm giving them a B- here. They address some needs, but I think, again, they just could have done a little bit better. They, like you mentioned, they take a lot of guys on the line, both the O-line and the D-line, so they did a good job with that. But I just think with a guy like Penei Sewell sitting on the board, obviously Jamar Chase, and pairing him with Joe Burrow is going to be great, but when you got some of these very tough defenses like Pittsburgh and Baltimore have in their division, and even Cleveland is no slouch either, so they got 3 tough defensive schemes to go up against, and I just don't know if they're going to be able to handle that with not having, a Pro Bowl type lineman like a Penei Sewell, the number 1 consensus guy available in the draft this year. So for me, I think that was just, it was tough. But Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow, hopefully that connection translates well to the NFL. But for the time being, you and I both giving the Cincinnati Bengals a B- and Who Dey Nation. So with that, we'll move on to the last team in the AFC North, the hosts of the 2021 NFL Draft, the Cleveland Browns. And Miklos, you and I, in the years of doing this show, obviously the Browns have been kind of the team that we kind of just have tried not to laugh at. But again, they're like the Jets. They're trying to build their way back up into respectability, and they've done that the last couple of years, especially last year with Kevin Stefanski. Was a great addition as head coach for them and kind of solidified the Browns. They obviously had a solid year with an 11-5. They went to the playoffs and then unfortunately lost in the playoffs. But it was a great building year for this Browns team as they continue to try to learn how to win and win when it matters. So what did you think of the Browns in their draft this year? Their biggest needs were defensive tackle, inside linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver, and defensive end.
Yeah, I think the Browns continuing to build off of some great drafts they've had and great off seasons they've had over the past couple of years. And what Kevin Stefanski has done there has just been incredible and just good for football. I think, as we mentioned, with the Jets getting better, the Browns being better, making the playoffs and competing, it just makes the league better as a whole. And I think they had a dynamite draft here, as along with their off season as well. They continue to just add talent. Through free agency, bringing in John Johnson at safety was just dynamite. Jadeveon Clowney, I mean, he hasn't really been what people expected of him, but I mean, you add him opposite of Myles Garrett, and I mean, it's not like he's bad. He just hasn't lived up to his billing is all. And then the draft, I think they did an amazing job. They added Greg Newsome, who was one of the top ranked corners, and they immediately have him slotting in to start likely, especially with Greedy Williams' injury history opposite, but having Newsome opposite of Denzel Ward to just solidify what's going to be a pretty gross secondary over there. Especially, I think most people forget that last year's second round pick and at the time consensus top safety in the draft, Grant Delpit, is going to be coming back healthy. So it's almost like they had a second first round pick safety from this draft. He's going to be coming back for his first year with John Johnson from the Rams over top. It's going to be really solid in the back end. And then in the second round, they add Jeremiah Owusu-Kamara from Notre Dame, and people talk about him not really having a position, but that's exactly what you want in the modern NFL defense, is a guy who can just play all over the place and rush the passer. And given how solid their defense is across the board, this is a perfect player to add into the mix and just say, hey man, get out there, play football, get after the quarterback, make plays. That's all you need to do. Takes a lot of pressure off of him as a rookie coming in and just allows him to use his unbelievable athleticism. I think it's overall a great draft by the Browns. I'm going to give them an A to an A+.
Wow. Okay, so there's our biggest grade so far of the show. An A to an A+ for the Cleveland Browns for Miklos. I believe you gave them kind of around the same last year because they had a solid draft again last year, adding a lot of talent. But I agree with you. I think the secondary is going to be very, very solid. Our lads already has Greg Newsome in as the opposite cornerback to Denzel Ward. So with Grant Dalpett, like you mentioned, a great safety that he was coming out of last year, going to be healthy. So I think the Browns did a solid job here. I think Newsome was a solid pick for them. They had they're picking later in the draft here, so they didn't really have a lot of top-end picks. They're picking at the end of rounds for the most part. They drafted high in the 4th round with James Hudson, the offensive tackle from Cincinnati, but I think they did a solid job at addressing a lot of the biggest needs here, and they get a couple of solid guys on the defense with their first 2 picks. So for me, I'm going to give the Browns, them a fringe B+ to an A- here. I think there are things that could have been a little bit better, but again, you can't really harp on what the Browns and Kevin Stefanski have been doing because they are building back up, and especially in this division, which is going to be very, very tough once again with the Steelers and the Ravens and even the Bengals trying to get better. The Browns are no slouch, and I think they're going to be in playoff contention again next year, and that's because of what they did in this offseason, like you mentioned. So for me, I'm going to give the Browns a B+ to an A-. You're on the A to an A+ rating for the Cleveland Browns, and it looks to be another strong AFC North division this year. So with that said, Baltimore B+ for both of us, Cincinnati B-. We were both in consensus there. Pittsburgh, I gave them a B- to a B. Miklos gave them a B, and then like we just mentioned with Cleveland, B+, A-, and an A to an A+. So with that said, that's going to wrap it up for the AFC North, and we'll take our next commercial break here. Get your popcorn ready. We've still got 2 divisions left to talk about in the AFC, starting off with the North when we come back from our next commercial break on Straight to the Extra Point in our 2021 Draft Recap Show of the AFC right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network.
J&L Flooring is a Niagara-based specialty flooring and design company. They take great pride in providing elite customer service and support. They are a specialty flooring and decor boutique shop with a beautiful showroom, great pricing, and a wide variety and truly unique selection of products. All their products are environmentally friendly and responsibly produced, so you can feel great about your flooring choices. Their goal as a local business is to build authentic relationships based on honesty and integrity that they foster with respect and authenticity, offering a unique and wide range of quality products presented by a knowledgeable and patient team. They connect with their customers to simplify the process to make their life easier and to make their homes beautiful. Visit them at 4424 Montrose Road, Niagara Falls, or find out more at jnlflooring.com. Open Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. through 5 p.m., and Saturday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. 905-358-3299 J&L Flooring.
The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill is located on the top of Clifton Hill and just a 5-minute walk from the majestic Niagara Falls. It is conveniently nestled in the heart of the tourist district. A family-owned and operated business, the Spicy Olive opened its doors in May of 2003 and has since been established as an authentic and unique Italian restaurant and bar. Its rustic ambiance and time-worn finishing provide a warm and inviting dining experience. Offering an array of delicious dishes, they specialize in authentic Italian cuisine, homemade sauces, fresh ingredients, and consistently providing a strong foundation on which they build their menu. As night falls, the Spicy Olive shifts to a lively lounge where drinks and live music come together to make a perfect evening. For more than 15 years, they have provided not only for their dedicated locals, but their customers from all over the world with authentic Italian food and great live entertainment. Open daily 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. for dinner and till 2 a.m. for drinks. Check out their new menu and book reservations on their website at Spicy Olive Bar and Grill, it's with an E at the end, .com, or call 905-371-2323 for reservations as well. The Spicy Olive Bar and Grill.
This is the Armchair GM Sports Network.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to segment 3 of our AFC 2021 Draft Recap Show. Brandon Caputo Miklos McMaster back with you here. And this third segment on today's show is brought to you by Niagara Employment Help Center, helping job seekers find work with their free services and counseling professionals, located at 6100 Thorlstone Road, Niagara Falls, across from Measles Plaza. Call to book your appointment today to jumpstart your job search at ehc.on.ca. Speaking of job search, Miklos, the Houston Texans need to continue their job search for an offensive coordinator, as they currently do not have one under a new head coach David Culley and defensive coordinator Lovie Smith. So again, we're starting off here with the AFC South, and we've been giving a lot of good draft grades so far. No team has been in the C's yet so far, but that's where the Houston Texans come in and ruin it right off the start to start the AFC South recap here, Miklos. And oh man, we could have a whole hour episode on what's going on with this team. Obviously, they fired Bill O'Brien as GM and coach last year. The Deshaun Watson situation, he wants out. Will he get traded with all the pending accusations? He still hasn't been traded at this point. Probably won't report back to the Texans. They don't have a first and second round pick this year. Just a lot of mess going on down there in Houston, Miklos. The biggest needs were if they couldn't just put everything on ESPN.com, they probably would have. But defensive end, wide receiver, running back, corner, D tackle. Again, they only had 2/3, 2/5, and a 6th. So take it away here. I know I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this dreaded Houston Texans.
Yeah, I mean, I think amazingly enough, Bill O'Brien was kind of like a magnet of all of everyone's negative attention about the Texans. And then whenever he disappeared, everyone realized that it wasn't just him, that the whole organization appears to just be rotten all the way through. Like, it's unbelievable how, since he has left, how the organization has just fallen apart. I mean, their all-star quarterback, in all of the mess that he's involved in, I mean, it's hard to see him coming out of it unscathed, given the number and volume of accusations against him. But I just feel so bad for David Culley. He finally gets an opportunity to be the head coach of an NFL team, and this is the situation that he gets put into. And I mean, I know they actually added some nice pieces in free agency, trying to fill in some depth across their roster. But it's unbelievable to see a team lose so much premier talent and also all of their draft picks with it. It's unbelievable. Like, I don't know how they parted with J.J. Watt and then had DeAndre Hopkins leave and lose all of these premier guys on their team, and they have exactly zero draft capital to show for it. It's incredible. So, I mean, they did what they could, but they then go and draft a quarterback with their first pick, and I don't think they know what they want. I mean, I think they wanted to trade Deshaun Watson, but they didn't really want to, and then all the accusations came out, so then they couldn't trade him. But now they're like, I don't know, he probably won't play football after all of this, if all of it happens to be true. And we got Tyrod Taylor, but, you know, he's like meh as a starter, so I guess we're looking for the quarterback of the future. And it's like, really, that's how you just decide with your first pick in the third round that you're like, yeah, we're going to start everything over again, starting in the third round. So I don't know what they're doing or what they're trying to do over here. But, yeah, I feel bad for Davis Mills. But, you know, I don't think much is expected of him. So he has an opportunity to come out and maybe win a starting job and see what he can make out of it. But I think overall I'm giving like a C- to a D+ because it's just been a mess in Houston.
I mean, what did they really expect Davis Mills, their first pick in the third round, to go in and be the starting quarterback for this team? Like, again, you mentioned Tyrod Taylor, and they have Ryan Finley as well. So I really don't know what they're expecting from Davis Mills, but oh boy, I hope it's not a whole lot, because he's not going to probably get a whole lot with this Houston Texans roster. And they've been able to, they've gotten a bunch of guys that are basically past their prime here. They've got David Johnson, Mark Ingram at running back. Philip Lindsay as well has signed with the Houston Texans. And then you have Brandon Cooks and Randall Cobb as wide receivers. Kiki Coutie's nice as well, but again, just not good. I'm wondering how long before Laramie Tunsil gets traded, because that's the guy that they gave up those first-round picks to get when they were trying to protect Deshaun Watson, and that has completely backfired, as they have not been in contention since making that trade, really, and they've lost out on draft capital for trading for Laramie Tunsil. So what are they going to do with him?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like if they are going to get some draft capital back and try and remake this team, they might have to part with the few talented players they have on this roster, but I just don't see them doing that, especially given how young Tunsil is, and you want to build off of your offensive line on the offensive end, so they want to at least give Mills a chance back there and try and get him some blockers. So we'll see. I don't even know where you start with Houston, to be honest.
Yeah, and then they take a wide receiver in the third round, Nico Collins from Michigan. Just they need everything, and I feel like they didn't do a good enough job of that. They take again a quarterback, like in the third round with it's your first pick of the draft. You have so many needs, and you take a quarterback when you still don't even know what your quarterback situation is going to be like, and you have a couple of guys there. Just didn't make sense to me. Just kind of like last year with the Bears taking a tight end with their first pick after they didn't have any picks until late in the second round. So it just didn't make sense to me then. Kind of like it doesn't make sense for me for Houston. I'm going to give them a straight D because I don't know what Houston's going to do from here. But like you mentioned, David Culley, feel bad for him. He's been in the league for a long time, finally getting a shot as a head coach, and it's going to be tough sledding for him from day one. So a D for Houston for myself, and Miklos gives them a D+ to a C-. So not good for the Houston Texans, but let's move on here to the Indianapolis Colts, and this is an interesting team here, Miklos, because obviously they had the retirement of Phillip Rivers, and I think if they would have gotten a little bit more out of him, they had a great shot at beating the Buffalo Bills in the first round of the playoffs last year. They put up a heck of an effort up there in Buffalo, and a team that finished 11-5, second in the division last year, and they go out and get Carson Wentz and pair him with oh my God, I'm drawing a blank on their head coach now, Frank Reich. How could I forget the Buffalo Bill legend, Frank Reich, who was paired with him in Philadelphia. So hopefully that connection there can be good for Carson Wentz, and the change of scenery was not given a lot of help in Philadelphia the last couple of years. He's going to a team that was basically a quarterback away from being a contender. I think they do that here. And their biggest needs were offensive tackle, D-end, wide receiver, safety, tight end. They covered all those bases, Miklos.
Yeah, I think it was a great draft by the Colts, and I really think they're banking a lot on the Frank Reich Carson Wentz relationship. And if that relationship can pay off like it did in Philadelphia, then I mean, the sky's the limit for the Colts here. They're very solid across the board. Tight ends, running backs, wide receivers, offensive line are all rock solid, and they really were just missing a quarterback on their offense. So if Carson Wentz can turn around his early Philadelphia Eagles form, then the Colts are going to be scary going into this season. So they tackle the things that they needed in this draft. They add some edge rushers. They are hoping that Kwity Paye from Michigan turns into a premier edge rusher for them, and that even Dayo Odeyingbo out of Vanderbilt, if he can develop his tools and become another solid pass rusher for them. They both are giving DeForest Buckner some help. I mean, he was getting a lot of attention because he was really their biggest pass rushing threat. But then from there on out, they're pretty rock solid across the board. So they're just adding depth guys. And I think Sam Ehlinger is the interesting pick. I mean, hook 'em horns. He's from your favorite Texas Longhorns. So they're adding some quarterback depth behind Carson Wentz. So he might be an interesting developmental prospect in the future.
I don't know how Sam's going to develop into an NFL quarterback, but I do like the pick late in the 6th round. You get a guy that obviously shown a lot of promise with Texas, and it's a shame not to have him back for the Longhorns next year, but that's what happens in college. You got to move on from these guys, and it was 4 great years of Sam Ehlinger in Texas. So with that said, I mean, I think they did a solid job getting 2 defensive ends, like you mentioned, just taking a little bit of the pressure off of DeForest Buckner and those double teams that he was seeing. So I think that was great for the Colts, and they already got their quarterback. So they really didn't have any huge glaring needs. They were already a solid roster. They had a couple of needs as far as depth-wise go, and I mean, with what they took, I mean, Kwity Paye is on our lads is the only guy that goes into a starting position from the draft. So they were really just looking to fill up a lot of depth on a good Indianapolis Colts team, and I think this is going to be a solid year for the Colts. And if, like you mentioned, the Frank Reich and Carson Wentz combo can rejuvenate from their days in Philadelphia, I think Indianapolis is going to be a force to be reckoned with, especially in the AFC South. So for me, I'm going to give the Indianapolis Colts a B+ here for their draft.
Yeah, I give them a solid B. I mean, Kwity Paye, there are still some questions about him, and other than that, they really didn't get any immediate impact players in this draft, but it was a solid draft overall without any glaring needs, so a solid B for the Colts.
Okay. I gave them a B+ because they addressed all 5 of their biggest needs. So for me, I think that's deserving enough. Maybe a little bit generous. Maybe I should have went more towards a B, but I'll go with a B+ for Sam Ehlinger with a little bit of Texas bias there. But I think they did a great job on the defensive end spot there. So no 3rd round pick. I think they did a solid job coming out of there, a lot better than what their division rival in Houston looks like. So B+ for me, B for Miklos for the Indianapolis Colts. Moving on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. And oh man, did this team need a big draft. And I've got a nice write-up here from my buddy Nathan Zavarella, big Jacksonville Jaguars fan. Afraid to admit it the last couple of years. Oh man, he's went through some tough times there, but he gives us something nice here to talk about. He says, personally, I give the Jags draft a B+. I felt we missed on Owuzu twice, as well as Morig, the safety. Those are 2 guys I had going in the first. I felt both were huge needs in our defensive lineup. Owuzu reminds me a lot of Telvin Smith, and I feel like he would have had similar role with the Jags. However, our draft was solid. Obviously, T. Lawrence is the franchise quarterback that the Jaguars have been longing for since their inaugural season. He was the obvious choice, and the team has solid weapons around to make him successful. They brought in Manhurts from Carolina to add value in our run game, which takes pressure off of a young quarterback. ETN was also an interesting selection at 25, but I like it. This brings 3 solid backs into Jacksonville. ETN is a special player that adds some serious outlets and a safety net in the pass game. Most successful teams utilize a dual back system. Look at the Saints with Ingram and Kamara, both successful and fresh. I see with Robinson and ETN having Carlos Hyde there to spill. I like Campbell, tall, long, and fast. This will be a developer. I can see him being a serviceable addition to the secondary in a couple years' time. He will be the number 2 corner. Walker Little would have gone in the first round if he didn't sit out 2020. 6'7", 313 pounds, and moves very well for that size. That is a great pick with Cam Robinson's contract coming to an end. It will probably be the deciding factor whether we re-sign him long-term or go with Little the following year. Andre Cisco is a steal in my eyes. If he hadn't have gotten hurt last season, Cisco was for sure top safety pick in this draft. 13 picks in 14 games. Kid's a baller. If he bounces back from his injury 100%, he has all the tools to be a successful safety in the NFL. Jordan Smith was a big pickup. We needed help on the edge, and finally, the Jags are switching to a 3-4 personnel. This is going to help Clavon Chason and Josh Allen tremendously. Bringing in Jordan gives us size and power, allowing him to play edge and even shift inside on certain packages. Lastly, Jordan Camp, I like the pick in the 6th round. Guy's an absolute freak, 6'2", 220, and fast. And it will be a travesty not to mention his pro day where he threw up 225 30 times, which would have been an NFL Combine record at 4.43 40 times. This kid reminds me of A.J. Brown in stature and playing style. He could become a solid late-round pick for the Jags that could crack the depth chart and take off some punt return time from Shenault, Jones, and Johnson. So thank you very much, Nathan, for your enthusiasm of the Jacksonville Jaguars and your response there. Much appreciated. So Miklos, obviously Trevor Lawrence was the number 1 overall pick. It was a big draft for the Jags. They had two firsts, 2 seconds. Their biggest needs were everything, including quarterback, tight end, offensive tackle, safety, and wide receiver. They checked off all those boxes. What did you think of the Jags draft?
Yeah, I think they're probably the team that everyone who is new to the NFL or just a casual NFL fan, and maybe even some really hardcore fans as well, are most excited about for this season. I mean, I feel like we've been talking about Trevor Lawrence coming into the NFL since he stepped foot on Clemson's campus. He's been one of the most hyped prospects coming out of college, and especially with Urban Meyer finally taking the jump to the NFL, that is going to be extremely interesting to see, as we have seen many of college's top coaches come and dip their toe in the NFL waters and really not work out for them. It's going to be really interesting to see how both Trevor Lawrence and Urban Meyer react whenever, say, they start the season off 4-4, and both of them have then lost more games than they ever have in their entire careers. So that'll be very interesting to see how they react, because despite the wealth of talent they brought in, and even the free agents they were able to draw in, because the free agents knew that Urban Meyer and Trevor Lawrence were coming to Jacksonville, the NFL is a completely different ball game, and especially Urban Meyer won't be able to recruit players year in and year out. It'll be very interesting to see how the drafts grow in the future. Putting that aside, they got their hands down quarterback of the future in Trevor Lawrence stepping in right away. They added lots of, as much talent as they could on the offense over the offseason as well to give Trevor Lawrence some help. I think drafting Travis Etienne, even though they had Carlos Hyde, and we saw the unbelievable emergence of James Robinson last year, the familiarity with Trevor Lawrence and his ability to just be a weapon all over the place is going to be very important for this offense. They also added Marvin Jones in the offseason to add to the already stellar play of DJ Chark and last year's rookie Laviska Shenault. So I think the offense is going to be really solid. And then on defense, they added Tyson Campbell to add some more depth to their secondary, which needs some help, and Andre Sisco as well. I mean, we've had some up and down play from the young players on the defense, so it's really going to be make or break for the Jaguars about how much impact their rookie players can have for this team. But overall, given the needs that they had and the position they were in, I think it's a really solid draft. A to A- for them.
Okay, A- to an A for the Jacksonville Jaguars from Miklos. So again, I liked what the Jags did. Trevor Lawrence, obviously, and Travis Etienne. I think the combo is nice with Clemson. I just don't know why they go with that if they're going to have James Robinson, who was a stud last year, again, a late round pick, just coming out of nowhere. And then you obviously have Carlos Hyde as well. And we've heard Urban Meyer say that he's going to use a different running back on all three downs. I don't know how much I'm taking out of that. He might be just saying that to try to make all three guys look good at the start, but again, Etienne, I just don't know where he fits. Obviously, he's going to be ahead of Carlos Hyde, you would think already, but why do you have James Robinson and Carlos Hyde there? I mean, I know you need running back depth, and if one of those guys goes down, it's going to look like a genius pick, but I don't know. With their second first-round pick, I think they definitely could have addressed another need there, but I'm not going to give them too much harp on that because Etienne, in my opinion, him and Najee Harris were like 1A, 1B best running backs available in the draft, so they go and get the best quarterback and arguably the best running back, and they were teammates at Clemson, so there's already that familiarity there, that connection. So for me, I'm going to give the Jags a B+ to an A-. I think, again, getting Trevor Lawrence as generational talent as he is projected to be is already a win in that scenario, and they filled all their top 5 needs according to ESPN.com. So, and they had a lot of picks here. I think they had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 picks. So they had a lot of draft picks this year, and they needed to fill as this Jacksonville Jaguars team continues to build back up. And like you mentioned with Urban Meyer, we'll see how he translates. And apparently he signed Tim Tebow as a tight end, which we don't really know what the deal is with that, if he's even going to crack the roster. But that familiarity there with Urban Meyer in college, we'll have to see if that even amounts to anything. But as far as the draft goes, I'm with you. Jacksonville had a solid draft. I'm a B+ to an A-. You're in an A- to an A with the Jags as they continue to build back up here and look like they're going to be, like you mentioned, the trendy team this year with the Jacksonville Jaguars after their 1-15 season last year, and we'll have to see, and hopefully they have a lot better of a result than that. So we'll move on to the last team in the AFC South, and that is the Tennessee Titans. And obviously got some thoughts for the Titans from good friend and contributor for our college football show. He is Trey Patterson. He says, my initial reaction to the Titans draft was meh. Not really disappointed, but not impressed either. I wish we could have taken a wide receiver sooner, but the defense was decimated and needed to be replenished. I love the 2 corner picks, and hopefully the offensive linemen we took this year do better than Isaiah Wilson did last year. It would be hard not to, as he's not even in the NFL anymore. All in all, it was an okay draft, but not overly impressive. Also, we drafted a DN who has had a battery charge lingering over his head, so great work with that. And I believe Trey said that he gave, I just have to pull up the text message here because he didn't put it in. He said C+ for the draft grade for the Tennessee Titans, so not the greatest available for the Titans with what they were picking at in the draft. Trey gave us some decent thoughts there. Miklos, their biggest needs were wide receiver, tight end, corner, offensive tackle, and safety. They filled all those except for tight end. What did you think of the Titans this year?
Yeah, I'm a little confused with some of their picks. Not so much the positions drafted, as you mentioned, they filled their needs, but maybe the location. I think Caleb Farley is a good pick. It's a little bit risky, though. I mean, he's got a pretty extensive injury history, but he is unbelievably talented as a corner. And considering how in retrospect, kind of happy the Raiders didn't draft Christian Fulton because he's been a pretty huge disappointment for the Titans. And Damon Arnett, we'll get to him. I was pretty happy with his play last year. But yeah, Caleb Farley, they did need a corner to fill in the opposite of Janoris Jenkins, filling in their cornerback spot, as they lost both their starters from last year in the this offseason. So if he comes back healthy and can play at the form that he was at before, then that's a really solid pick for him. But lots of question marks there. Then there's Dylan Reduns. Also a little bit undersized and not the highest ranked tackle. Maybe it would have been better if they drafted a higher ranked tackle in the first round and then got a solid corner in the second round, and that way got 2 impact players. So we'll see there, especially because, I mean, for anyone out there who doesn't know Isaiah Wilson's story, I encourage you to go out there and read it, because it is unbelievable how someone could possibly screw up his situation any worse than he did. It's incredible. He literally just did not want to play football, which is wild for a first-round draft pick. But yeah, for the rest of the draft, I'm amazed they didn't get another wide receiver a bit higher. They added Josh Reynolds in free agency, but he's been pretty meh since the Rams drafted him originally. And even though Corey Davis was not what people expected, his departure now lets teams focus fully on A.J. Brown, which could be a problem for him this year if no one else is able to become a threat. I think they did get some late-round picks, but it's always risky to rely on late-round receivers to make an impact like that. So overall, yeah, I'm going to have to give him probably a C+ for this draft of the Titans.
Okay, C+ for Miklos. And again, they need – Corey Davis had a productive year last year in his contract year, and there was a lot of good receivers available in the second and third round. It was a deep wide receiver class. They get one in the fourth round with Des Fitzpatrick, but I really think that they could have went up and got one of those top-end guys to put alongside opposite to A.J. Brown. I think that would have been a big need for the Titans, and I think Trey mentioned that as well, that was kind of something he was disappointed in. Caleb Farley, again, there's injury history there, but they really needed to take a cornerback, Miklos. I mean, they, like you mentioned, they lose their 2 starters, including Adoree Jackson, on their secondary, so they really needed some help there. He's already on Ourlad, slotted in as the right side cornerback on the opposite side there of Janoris Jenkins, and even Kevin Byard and Dane Cruikshank, their safety. So they definitely needed cornerback was their biggest need, I think, and they addressed that. So I think that was big for them. But then a couple of the later round picks to me were just kind of questionable. I think they definitely should have reached for a receiver in the second or third round, and then kind of filled it out from there. They didn't draft a tight end, which they lost Jonnu Smith this year, who signed a big deal with the New England Patriots, although we don't know how much they're going to be using their tight end now that Arthur Smith, the tight end guru, it seemed like, is now the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, so he's no longer in Tennessee where they use their tight ends frequently. So we'll see how Ted Doning is going to be using tight ends. But I'm going to give the Titans a C here, C to a C+. I just think that they could have done a lot better, in my opinion, with some of the picks that they had. It wasn't the greatest. They didn't have the greatest draft pick capital, but they had better than some of the teams that ended up getting higher draft grades. So for me, I think Farley was a nice pick, but other than that, I think the Titans could have done better, although they did add some nice pieces. So it wasn't the worst draft, but it wasn't the greatest. So I'm going to give the Titans a C to a C+, and Miklos is going to give them a C+. So that's it for the AFC South. A couple of good grades and a couple not so good grades. Houston, I gave a D. Miklos gave them a D+ to a C-. Indianapolis, a B+ for me, a B for Miklos. And Jacksonville Jaguars leading the way in this division with as far as their draft grade goes. I gave them a B+ to an A-. Miklos gives them an A- to a grade A for Jacksonville Jaguars draft. And then obviously the Tennessee Titans we just mentioned, C to a C+ and a C+ from Miklos there. So we've got one more division to go here in the AFC, and it's going to be finishing off with the AFC West, and Miklos's Las Vegas Raiders should be a good discussion there. So stay right here. Be right back on Straight to the Extra Point, our AFC Draft Recap Show for 2021, right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network. Come prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive is a daily fantasy sports and esports app for player props. With Thrive, you can eliminate the countless hours of research and focus only on the top-tier athletes who have the biggest impact on the game. Choose between lineups of 5 or 10 players to build your daily lineups. Each prop is assigned a fantasy value for both the over and the under based on the likelihood of it occurring. Hit the most props and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Thrive has over $20,000 in guaranteed prizes weekly and has awarded over $4 million to date. At the Armchair GM Sports Network, we have you covered. Use our promo code AGM Sports when you sign up today, and you'll receive an instant price match on your first deposit of $20 to $50. Again, the code is AGM Sports to receive the price match on your first deposit. Download the Thrive Fantasy app on the Apple or Google Play Store in both Canada and the United States, or by visiting their website at thrivefantasy.com for online betting. Sign up and prop up today with Thrive Fantasy.
You're listening to the Armchair GM Sports Network, the Niagara region's best local source for North American sports podcasting coverage. By sports fans, for sports fans.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the final segment of our AFC 2021 Draft Recap Show. Brandon Caputo and Miklos McMaster back with you here. And in this last segment, we are going to be going over the AFC West Division, and it is brought to you by Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, home of the best pizza wing combos in Niagara Falls, Ontario, from Niagara this week, 4 years running. Visit them at carmine'spizzeria.ca and like them on Facebook for unique promotions. Available for call-in, pickup, or delivery. Carmine's Pizzeria Italiano, way too good. Miklos, let's get into it with the AFC West, and we'll start off with the Denver Broncos. And we have one Denver Broncos thought this year from a contributor to the Armchair GMs. He is Colin Ward, who covers our baseball portion of our network. So Colin sent in about his Denver Broncos and says, round 1, 9th overall, Patrick Surtain, the second defensive player off the board this year, just brings depth to the corner position where they have Bryce Callahan and Kyle Fuller on one-year deals. Second round, Javonte Williams, running back, North Carolina, top 3 running back in the draft, who the Broncos traded up to get. Javonte fits the Broncos system and will learn a lot starting the year off as the second running back position behind Melvin Gordon, who has 1 year left on his deal as well. Round 3, Quinn Meinerz, the center from Wisconsin. He had an excellent Senior Bowl who came in on a lot of teams' radars, drafted as an offensive guard, but is expected to play center for the Broncos. Their other third-round pick, Baron Browning from Ohio State, the linebacker. The biggest position needed going into the draft was middle linebacker, someone who can cover tight ends. Browning could definitely possibly be starting middle linebacker by week 5. 5th round pick, Caden Stearns, safety from Texas. Kind of surprise pick, but Caden was a highly regarded recruit at a high school, and the Broncos seem to think they have another Justin Simmons with this pick. Their other 5th round pick, Jamar Jackson, safety from Indiana. Johnson is a guy similar to their first 2 picks. Kareem Jackson, starting safety, is on a 1-year deal. Johnson is expected to sit behind Jackson for the first year and step in the following year. Round 6, Seth Williams, wide receiver. Williams is a depth pick. I think the Broncos see a lot of Tim Patrick, and why the Broncos' wide receiver room is Williams. Will have a lot of time to develop in that wide receiver room. Round 7, Kerry Vincent, cornerback from LSU, is a nice pick at 237th overall with the Broncos. He's a fast corner, going to fit the general great covering the slot with the Broncos. And their other 7th round pick, Jonathan Cooper, another Ohio State player here, linebacker. Jonathan's a great pick at 239 with the Broncos. He's a leader, and I think he will really excel behind Von Miller and Bradley Chubb for a year. Their other 7th round pick, they had 3 7th. Marquise Spencer, defensive end, Mississippi State. Interesting pick with the Broncos not having depth on the defensive front already, but Marquise will get a chance to develop, which will be interesting to see what his potential could be. Overall, good draft for the Broncos, but the depth on every position they needed to fill to do so with that. The Broncos, no doubt, have learned a lot last season about how much a lack of depth can hurt your franchise, and they believe with creating quality backups, they can be a wild card contender, no doubt. Okay, so Colin is very, I guess you could say, enthused by the Denver Broncos and what they did in the draft. So, Miklos, what's your thoughts on the Denver Broncos? The biggest needs: quarterback, inside linebacker, center, offensive guard, cornerback. Denver Broncos, what are your draft thoughts?
Yeah, so they were one of the teams I was super excited for last year before they proceeded to lose exactly everybody to injury. I don't think there is any amount of depth on planet Earth that could have saved them. You can't have a roster that big that could have saved them from last year. They just lost every person of talent that they had, but gave them a really good opportunity to get some valuable experience for their backups and see what they had in some of their young players who were still healthy. They're obviously all in on the quarterback competition of Drew Lock and Teddy Bridgewater, and I do think they still like Drew Lock, and he really just had no help last year. I know he's an extremely frustrating player, but the plan was to insulate him with talent and bring him along slowly, and I think that's what they're going to try to do now. I think adding Patrick Surtain was a really solid pick for them in the first round. That solidifies their secondary with Kyle Fuller. I mean, Bryce Callahan's been struggling with injuries. They also added Ronald Darby in the offseason as well to bring about a really solid secondary. The rest of their picks adding depth because they really, outside of quarterback, it's not like they had a ton of needs. Denver is a really good team. They just lost pretty much everybody to injury, and there's not much you can do. So the hope is that everyone comes back healthy and doesn't lose any steps and continues to progress forward. So overall, I think it was a really solid draft. I'll give them a B+ based on adding the amount of depth and even adding some more weapons for Drew Lock.
Okay, a B+ for the Denver Broncos, and I just think with the Patrick Surtain pick at number 9, it just solidified the fact that they do believe in Drew Lock, and at least for one more year with all the quarterbacks that were still available, them not taking a quarterback goes to show that they really think that Drew Lock could be the guy if given a proper full roster that is not completely decimated with injury, like you mentioned. And this is a team that lost their entire quarterback room at one point and had to start a guy that hadn't played quarterback since high school. And he was a wide receiver. I can't even remember the guy's name now, but it was just it was a mess. Like this Broncos team was decimated more than, I think, them and San Francisco to me were the two teams that were more decimated with injuries than anybody in the league last year. So they didn't get to show their true potential, and it was just a disastrous year for the Broncos given those circumstances. So I think they did a good job at filling the needs. Obviously, Denver going after defense in the first round, that's nothing that we shouldn't be shocked about with Denver. They had Noah Fant, their tight end that they drafted in the first round last year, and Drew Lock as well, or a couple years back, and Drew Lock as well. Then you have Jerry Jeudy, the stud wide receiver they took in last year's draft with the high pick. So I think this Denver team, like you mentioned, they didn't really have a lot of holes to fill. They just need to get everybody healthy, and they needed to get depth in a lot of positions that they clearly did not have last year, and it clearly showed, as Colin mentioned in his report there. But I think Baron Browning I had him going in the first round, Miklos, just because of the fact that there weren't a lot of linebackers available, and I thought some of those later teams in the first round kind of needed to reach for linebackers. He was a guy I saw as a first-round talent that ended up going in the third round, and with their second third-round pick, no less.
Yeah, I mean, I think the evaluations were pretty crazy this year, especially with the COVID season and everything. So that may be why some players who may have been higher or lower ranked in other years ended up in different places. But overall, just really solid draft by the Broncos, who are showing that they're given the which is kind of rare nowadays, to be honest, given the confidence to their young quarterback who's been struggling out of the gate.
Yeah, they pick up 4 guys in the secondary, Miklos, 2 corners and 2 safeties, so definitely filling out needs and depth for the Denver Broncos. I'm going to give them another fringe grade. I'm going to give them a B to a B+, just for the fact that I think, with their second round pick, maybe taking a running back maybe wasn't the smartest decision to go with, but Phillip Lindsay obviously moving on, and Melvin Gordon on the last year of his deal, it might not end up being that bad of a draft pick, but just could have seen them fill in something else there. But I'm going to go with a B to a B+ for the Denver Broncos. Solid draft, and again, they just need to stay healthy to compete next year in a very tough division. So Miklos going to give them a B+ as well. Moving on to the Kansas City Chiefs. Obviously, we know what this team is. They're the team that everybody is trying to build around to beat in the AFC, the team that you have to go through in the AFC Conference. Obviously, making the Super Bowl the last 2 years, winning it 2 years ago. They didn't have a first-round pick. Obviously, they made that trade to get their biggest area of need, which was left tackle from the Baltimore Ravens, the trade that they had made. So they didn't have a first. They had 2 seconds, a fourth, 2 fifths, and a sixth for a team that made the Super Bowl last year. Miklos, what did you think of the Kansas City Chiefs draft? Obviously, their biggest needs, defensive end, wide receiver, outside linebacker, offensive guard, and safety. And you can even add left tackle in there before the trade that they had made with Baltimore.
Yeah, and I think the biggest needs for the Chiefs were really just across the board, their offensive line. That's really what cost them the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes was running for his life and just getting mugged out there. So they addressed that really in free agency and through trades, rebuilt their offensive line, brand new left tackle, left guard, and that was the biggest thing to protect their all-star quarterback's blind side. And then after that, they're just kind of filling in depth as they kept most of their pieces elsewhere. They add Cornell Powell from Clemson to kind of replace the departed Sammy Watkins, and if he can bring some of that ability to the wide receiving room, then the wide receiving room won't really lose a step. I mean, they've kept pretty much everyone else, so it's not like they had a lot of needs, which is crazy considering they just came from back-to-back Super Bowl appearances. So they add Nick Bolton with their first pick in the second round to add more depth to their linebacking room, and he's a pretty athletic guy at Missouri. Should bring some more talent there. Overall, I think it's just considering the lack of needs and how talented this roster already is. I think they added a lot of depth guys, and it's a solid B for this draft for them.
Okay, B for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think to be mentioned here, Miklos, I mean, they really had to rebuild the entire offensive line for this team, and like you mentioned, just Mahomes was under duress in that entire Super Bowl. So they go and get Joe Thuney, they get Orlando Brown, the big trade with Baltimore that they probably got a little bit of a better return than what people had expected them to have to give up to get a starting left tackle. But then they get Mike Remmers and Kyle Long, and they move Tardif to a backup role. They get Creed Humphreys, a backup center. And I think Trey Smith is a very, very interesting pick there in the 6th round. He's a guy that, when talking to Trey Patterson, who covers the Tennessee Vols, he said that Trey Smith, he really could have been a higher round draft pick, a guy that goes in the 2nd or 3rd round, but just, with the season that Tennessee had last year, just kind of fell out of graces and ended up becoming a 6th round pick. So I think he's a guy that definitely should have been he was definitely a higher rated talent than going in the 6th round. So he's another guy that can be a solid guy down the road for Kansas City as a left guard if he kind of projects into that spot. So for me, I think, like you mentioned, the Chiefs just had to fill some needs. They're a team that went to the Super Bowl and easily could have went back-to-back Super Bowls. So, I mean, they really don't have a lot of needs, but at the same time, you lose players because teams overpay for the guys that are successful and go on to win Super Bowls. So you kind of have to, it's never going to be the same 53-man roster year in and year out. So you're going to have to always make adjustments. And I think the small adjustments that the Chiefs needed, I think they addressed them here. So I'm with you. I'm going to give them kind of a B grade here. They didn't have a lot of they had 2 seconds, no 1st round pick, but making that trade for Orlando Brown was essentially better than any tackle that they were going to get in that spot at the 31st pick. So I think they did a solid job at gaining the assets that they needed, given the cap constraints that they are in as one of those top teams and a Super Bowl contending team that just has a lot of solid players on its roster. So for me, I'm going to give the Chiefs a B, and Miklos as well, B grade for the Kansas City Chiefs, the team to beat in the AFC, it seems, year in and year out. So we'll move on here. We're going to do the Los Angeles Chargers first here, Miklos. I'm going to leave your Vegas Raiders for last, best for last for you here on this episode. So we'll start off with the Los Angeles Chargers here. And this team is always the team that we look at. They have great talent, and then they never end up producing it once the year starts, and they always end up having a subpar record. 7-9 last year, 3rd in the division. So their biggest needs were offensive tackle, tight end, cornerback, defensive tackle, and wide receiver. A new regime there with Brandon Staley as head coach. In Los Angeles, we know what they have in Justin Herbert. What did you think? They had a lot of picks this year for the Los Angeles Chargers draft.
Yeah, I think they did a solid job. The first things first, get your brand new minted starting tackle to protect your brand new franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert, who just absolutely dominated last year as a rookie quarterback when Tyrod Taylor lost his job to injury, unfortunately. And then they added, if he can be anything like his dad, an incredibly talented corner in Asante Samuel Jr. With their 2nd pick. And then they got Herbert more help with Josh Palmer in the 3rd round. I think this is the Chargers are perpetually, as you mentioned, a team that just absolutely underachieves given the talent that they have. And they also suffered some key injuries last year, so they're going to be very excited to have Derwin James coming back. It's a huge player to come back for them in the secondary. He can play all over the place, just an unbelievable roaming safety, like a Jamal Adams for them back there. And then that's going to be their biggest upgrade. to their defense already without even drafting a pick. And then they added some really solid talent throughout this draft and a lot of depth to positions. I don't think there's anything too glaring that they needed, but they really filled automatic need with a new left tackle with Rashawn Slater. I think that was a great pick. And then depth throughout, including adding another wide receiver for Justin Herbert to throw to. Now they just got to, get rid of the Chargers monkey on their back, and they should be good.
Yeah, I mean, I really like this draft for the Los Angeles Chargers, Miklos. I know you're not going to like that as a Raiders fan, but again, we'll see what happens. They always seem to have, great teams on paper, but then once they hit the field, it never seems to accumulate into what we had expected. But Rashawn Slater, huge add to get to that left tackle spot to protect their prized possession in Justin Herbert. You get Asante Samuel, a junior at cornerback in the second round. He's another guy that was almost projected as a late first-round talent. Went in the second, 15th overall in that round. Josh Palmer, the Canadian from Tennessee, he was a guy that if Tennessee would have had a better quarterback throwing him the ball, he could have been, a late first, early second-round pick. So Josh Palmer's another solid guy, and we'll be looking at him as a great Canadian. Trey McKitty, the tight end from Georgia, another solid player from another solid program. And then later on in the draft, I think this is a very solid pick, Larry Roundtree III from Missouri. Had this guy in fantasy a couple years back in college fantasy football. He was a beast for Missouri. Last year he went down with an injury, so he did not play that much. So I think that's a very solid pick in the 6th round. And for the Chargers, I mean, Mike Williams going into his last year of his deal, so Josh Palmer could slide in as the number 2 wide receiver behind Keenan Allen as soon as next year ends if Mike Williams is not re-signed. And I just think it's a very, very solid draft up and down for the Chargers. They're already a good team on paper. They just really needed to fill in some depth and get a couple of key spots like that left tackle spot, which they were able to do. And Asante Samuel Jr. is going to go in there and make that secondary even better. So for me, I'm going to give my highest draft grade so far for the AFC, and it's going to be right near the end. I'm giving the Los Angeles Chargers an A here, Miklos.
I am also giving the Chargers an A for their draft. Really solid all around. They added some great talent, and like I said, they just got to make it happen on the field.
Yep, absolutely. So we're both giving the Chargers an A grade for what we just discussed there, with them filling a bunch of needs and getting a bunch of really good players with the amount of draft capital that they had this year. So they definitely had a lot of picks, which obviously helps when you're giving out a good draft grade to have a lot of picks to fill out a lot of needs. So we'll see what the Chargers do, but it's a good start for their new regime in this offseason, and hopefully Justin Herbert can take that next step in development. Great rookie year, and we'll see what the Chargers can do in that division. And last but not least, Miklos, the Las Vegas Raiders, and I'm just quickly going to go discuss here their needs, and then I'll let you get into it. Their biggest needs were offensive tackle, cornerback, safety, defensive tackle, and wide receiver. They had a first, second, 2/3, a fourth, a fifth, no sixth, but a seventh. I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to let you take this one on. Miklos, take it away with your Las Vegas Raiders draft recap.
Oh, God, my Raiders. I got to tell you. Well, one thing they did do was try and draft every single safety that was available in this draft, which, I mean, yeah, we did. I will start with the good first. We'll start with the good. So Trevon Moehrig immediately fills the need that the Raiders needed. The Raiders needed a guy who could range over the top, be a ball hawk, be the finesse true free safety for them, because they already have a human missile in Jonathan Abram, who, not the best in coverage, but he will certainly bring an absolute hammer down on anyone who's coming in the short passing game, or even adding a pass rush as well. So they needed that guy over top. I really like the second round pick of Trevon Moehrig. I think that's awesome. And then even the other 2 picks of Divine Diablo, another fantastic name, and Tyree Gillespie, both of them, watching them play, they're both extremely physical, bringing the hammer as well, which I personally really like that in the secondary. Although it looks like Divine Diablo is going to be slotted in as kind of this new era linebacker spot, kind of what they're hoping to get out of Tanner Muse if he can come back healthy after last year. So those are some nice depth picks as well. Now Alex Leatherwood, I know this feels a lot like the Clelin Ferrell pick, although given what Clelin Ferrell has brought to the defense, I think it'll be better for Alex Leatherwood. Clelin Ferrell has not brought anything flashy by any means, and definitely hasn't added the pass rush that everyone was hoping out of a first-round pick. But Alex Leatherwood, if he is not flashy and solid, that's all you need out of a right tackle. And based on what we have done with offensive linemen, I talked about it a lot last year, how we were able to make really, good things out of nothing with third and second players at various offensive line spots, which led to a lot of the talented players that we had leaving this offseason in trades. Really would have liked to kept Rodney Hudson, but the other guys were really expendable, if I'm being honest. So if Alex Leatherwood can just be solid, then I'm happy with this pick, despite the fact that there were better tackles on the board. They like him. He's from Alabama. It's right tackle. Basically, if he doesn't get noticed all season, I'll consider that a huge win. Now, Malcolm Kuntz, I hope that's not too much of a butchering of his last name, out of Buffalo. With a third-round pick, I don't know what we're doing here. So he's got some, good pass rushing skills, but he's coming out of UB. It's not a premier program. It's not like he was doing crazy things like Khalil Mack was doing whenever we drafted him out of UB. So this feels like a massive reach, and I don't even know what he's going to bring to a defense that really has a ton of needs. Nate Hobbs in the 5th round is a classic pick of us picking up a corner from a school that most people don't expect you to pick from. We like Louisiana Lafayette, which didn't have any corners in this year's draft, so we go with Illinois, And then Jimmy Morrissey, I'm always good to pick up a law offensive lineman late in the draft, so not much you can say about that. He adds more depth to the O-line, which despite the huge changeover, was really solid last year with tons of moving parts, and hopefully continues that way for this season.
So what is your draft grade for your Las Vegas Raiders?
It's a C to, and you know what? Not even a C. I'm going to give him a straight up C- for this. It's just like, there's so many needs that we need, especially on defense. And I really don't feel like they filled a lot of them. Trevin Moehrig, yes, fills a need. Divine Diablo, Tyree Gillespie, sure, they fill needs if our starters were solid, which they are not. So maybe get guys who can start right away, which is what we absolutely need. And then Malcolm Kuntz coming out of Buffalo, again, if we had starters and pass rushers, I know we brought in Yannick Ngakoue and Max Crosby has been a revelation for us, but seriously, we need someone who could provide a little bit more of a push and competition to this pass rush. So, yeah, I just don't see how we added what we needed with this draft.
It seems like under John Gruden, there's one or two picks every year that makes you scratch your head as a Raiders fan. The Cleveland Farrell reach, where he was drafted, where he was projected to go. Then you had Damon Arnett in the 1st round, which he's actually worked out pretty well, but he was projected as a reach where he was taken. And then Tanner Muse later on in the draft, a guy that was getting roasted by every single wide receiver that was drafted in that year, which they ended up moving him from safety to linebacker, so that wasn't as bad. But again, just a couple of head scratchers here. It seems like every year we get with the Raiders. Leatherwood, again, he's coming from Alabama, so it's a solid program. But other than that, why 3 safeties? That just makes no sense to me. I know Moehrig was like one of the top safeties available, if not the top safety available with Javon Holland. So they get that guy. But other than those 2 picks, it's kind of head scratcher for me, not even as a Raiders fan, just seeing their needs and what they took. Their 3 safeties, just I don't really understand where they're going with that.
Yeah, with the new era of NFL football, you want guys who can kind of play linebacker but also cover these hyper-athletic tight ends and still help in the run. So I get that that's what they're trying to fill with so many safety picks. But with just so many needs elsewhere, it feels like those picks would be made by a team who was already more solid in their front 7 and then can add these types of guys to the back end. Yeah, and then on the offensive side of the ball, they go and get Smokey John Brown and Willie Snead, both formerly of the Baltimore Ravens at one time. So do you think that's enough help for Derek Carr as far as receivers with Henry Ruggs out there, their 1st-round pick last year? Honestly, I think if Henry Ruggs can step in and be what Nelson Aguilar was last year, I'm not worried about the offense. The really concerning thing about the offense is that the offensive line, with so many changes, I think Rodney Hudson is going to be missed a lot with communication and holding everyone down. But for the rest of the spots, there's guys who played really solid last year, and they really didn't lose anyone else outside of Nelson Aguilar with their offense. So I think the offense is really going to be fine. I don't think they needed help for Derek Carr back there, other than adding the right tackle. But on the defense, they needed a lot more help than what they got.
Yeah, and again, it doesn't help when you don't have the greatest draft capital. They didn't have 12 picks in this draft like we talk about other teams having, but they had all their top end picks. They had an extra third, and then they didn't have a 6th round pick. When you look at the draft picks that they had, it looks like you could have mocked a couple of better draft boards and kind of laid it out better than what the Raiders ended up going with. But John Gruden is always going there with an off the beat plan of what he wants his team to look like. So again, the Raiders finishing 8-8 last year, and this division looks like it's only going to get better with Los Angeles and Denver trying to build back up. So the Raiders are going to have tough sledding ahead of them here.
For sure, it does feel like everybody else except for us either stayed pat in the Chiefs, which that's the absolute minimum of what you want considering you were in the Super Bowl, and then everyone else took a step forward. And I really feel like we stayed pat as well, if taking a step back, which considering how competitive the AFC West is getting is bad news.
Yeah, so for the AFC West draft grades, I gave the Broncos a B- to a B, a B to a B+. Miklos gave them a B+. Kansas City, we both were consensus on a B. Los Angeles Chargers were both consensus on an A grade for them. And for the Las Vegas Raiders, I was going to go with a C, but after listening to what Miklos said, I just went along with him and went with C- because he knows what he's talking about. So I'm going to give the Vegas Raiders a C-. Just it didn't really make sense. Even if they move one of those safeties to kind of a hybrid linebacker spot, just didn't make sense with, like Miklos had mentioned there greatly, the other needs that they needed to fill and kind of address there. But again, so the draft grades overall for the AFC, as I'm going off the list here, our top draft grades for Miklos, his first was the Cleveland Browns with an A to an A+. Second was the Los Angeles Chargers with an A. And third was the Jacksonville Jaguars with an A- to an A grade. So those were his top 3 grades given out. My top 3 grades given out, starting with first was the Los Angeles Chargers with an A grade. We both were agreeing they had a really, really solid draft with the amount of draft capital that they had. Second for myself was the New York Jets. I gave them an A-. And third was a 2-way tie between the Cleveland Browns and the Jacksonville Jaguars with a B+ to an A- grade. So a lot of teams that needed to get better, Miklos there, that definitely got better. And it's going to be better, I think, for the AFC overall as a competition level. The fact that the worst teams in the division mostly had the best drafts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the AFC is continuing to get more and more competitive, which is just fantastic considering how stagnant it has been the last decade with only 2 or 3 teams really being good. So it should be an interesting run for the playoffs this year based on how much change is happening with all these teams.
Absolutely. So that's going to do it for our AFC portion of our draft recap. Stay tuned for the NFC portion, which will be posted the following day when after preceding this AFC episode that will be going up first. So a thank you to Derek, Austin, Alex, Rob, Mike, Nick, Chico, Trey, Nathan, Colin, and that's it for the AFC portion of our fan input. So thank you very much, guys, for sending in your reactions to your team's favorite draft, and to you viewers for taking along and enjoying this in-depth episode, almost 2 hours long, for our AFC draft recap show. Much appreciated for staying with us here for a very long episode that Miklos and myself put a lot of effort into every single year. So with that said, that's going to wrap it up for this episode of Straight to the Extra Point and our AFC 2021 draft recap show right here on the Armchair GM Sports Network, your source of North American sports coverage by sports fans, for sports fans, delivered to you right here in the beautiful Niagara region. As always, I'm one of your hosts of this podcast. My name is Brandon Caputo. You can follow me on Twitter at Caputs13_AGM with a Canadian Z. As well, you can follow my co-host Miklos at Miklos_McMaster. A big thank you to all the great sponsors who put us on Support the Network, keeping the show on the air. And excuse me, to you viewers out there for tuning in and listening along for this very long episode of our AFC Draft Recap Show right here in the Armchair GM Sports Network by sports fans, for sports fans. We'll see you guys soon for the NFC portion of our recap.